And he'd say, do you remember the time you did this and you did that? And we'd look back and we'd laugh. Surely, he said, that is how it will be with God. We do things wrong now, but one day with him we'll look back and we'll laugh. Well, I imagine we'd all agree we do get things wrong. No one's perfect. We saw last week Hosea says the same thing. Only he puts it in rather kind of vivid language. He says we've committed spiritual adultery. Now, if you weren't here last week, I commented on this language of adultery. I'm aware it will strike us in different ways and produce certain reactions. I don't have time, I'm afraid, to repeat what we said last week on that. But please do, you can listen online if you go to our website. To sum up where we kind of got to, the Bible says we were made for God to know him in an exclusive relationship, a marriage relationship where we belong to him. And we were to give him our love and our trust as our husband, if you like. But we have all taken that love and that trust and given it to other things in our world. And so, to use Hosea's language, we've been unfaithful to him. We've been spiritually adulterous. And our question today is, how will God respond to that? There are two big answers to that question, and we're going to look at one this week and one next week. And let me say at the start, I really want you to hear both answers. I really want you to hear both answers. So much so, actually, at the end of this sermon, I'm going to refer to next week's answer, okay, to sort of flag it. But for now, we're going to focus on one way God responds to spiritual adultery. And I think Hosea wants us to see that God's response, this response, is awful but appropriate, frightening but fitting, terrible but right and just. And that's what we're going to explore. A quick reminder on the structure of Hosea. Because of the way it's laid out, we're taking a kind of a bit of a topical approach, really, an element of his message from the start and seeing how it plays out through the book. And so it means I'm going to read out quite a few verses. Don't try and look them up. You've got them on your handout. Just sit back and listen. First of all, Hosea says spiritual adultery leads to a reversal of riches. So God's people, Israel, had many good things they enjoyed: food, wine, families, children. And Hosea says God is going to act now, because of their unfaithfulness, he's going to act to reverse those into famine and barrenness and poverty. So 2 verse 9, I will take away my corn when it ripens, and my new wine, I'll take back my wool and my linen. Chapter 9, threshing floors and wine presses will not feed the people, the new wine will fail them. Later in chapter 9, Ephraim's glory will fly away like a bird. No birth, no pregnancy, no conception. Even if they rear children, I will bereave them of every one. And another area is, instead of being protected and secure as a nation, they are going to be defeated and taken away, exiled. Sometimes this is described as going to Egypt, because metaphorically, for Israel, Egypt was the place of captivity. That's where they come from. So, for instance, in chapter 8, now he will remember their wickedness and punish their sins. They will return to Egypt. Or chapter 9, verse 3, they will not remain in the Lord's land. They will return to Egypt and eat unclean food in Assyria. And Assyria is actually where they do end up. The point being, the riches of prosperity and the riches of protection are going to be reversed into poverty and captivity. Now, the idea of God doing this is hardly popular today, to say the least. And it may well raise questions for us. I'm going to say a bit more about that towards the end. For now, I want you to see that this isn't an arbitrary punishment. There's a logic to it. So chapter 2, verse 8 says, "She, Israel, has not acknowledged that I, God, was the one who gave her the grain, the new wine, and the oil lavished on her silver and gold." She hasn't acknowledged it came from me. Verse 12, "I'll ruin her vines and vineyards, which she said were her pay from her lovers." We saw last week, Israel worshipped Baal thinking he paid her in prosperity, in material goods. He gave her the vines and the fig trees. Actually, they came from God. But Israel wouldn't acknowledge that. So what was happening was, as God gave them crops and wine and food, Israel kept saying, "Isn't it great we worship Baal?" Do you see what a terrible position that puts God in? The more he provides for them, the more they thank Baal. It's like he's feeding their habit. So God says, "I'm going to show you who gives you these things. But the only way I can do it is by taking it away." Last week I mentioned the film Indecent Proposal. Demi Moore, Woody Harrelson, poor couple. And then Demi sells herself to Robert Redford, a billionaire, one night for $1 million. Let me rewrite the plot line, okay? So it gives us a more accurate picture of Israel and what's going on in Hosea. Imagine if Demi Moore was actually married to Robert Redford and his billions. And he buys her a mansion and he gives her everything she ever wanted. And then Woody, who hasn't got a penny, he turns up and says, "Come to bed with me and I'll lavish my riches on you." And Demi Moore falls for it. And she goes off and she sleeps with him. And she comes back to the mansion and she sips some champagne and she has some caviar and she lies back in the luxury bed and thinks, "My, that bloke Woody, he's really looking after me." After a while, Robert Redford catches on and says, confronts her, "You're sleeping around, what are you doing?" And she says, but I have to, he gives me everything." "No, he doesn't. This is all from me." But Demi is in denial. She thinks Woody gives her the money, the food, the home. So what will Robert Redford do? The more he gives her, the more she thinks Woody has come up trumps. So in the end, he'll say, "All right, no money, no mansion, no champagne. I'll take it all away. I'll reverse it. And then you'll realise who it came from." Sounds ridiculous. Wouldn't make a very good film, I'm sure. And they didn't do it like that. But that's the situation with Israel. She thanks Baal, she thanks Assyria for everything God gives her. And so God says in the end, "Okay, I'll take it away. I'll reverse it into poverty and captivity. And then you will realise it actually all came from me." That, if you like, is the kind of logic, the reasoning behind judgment. But there's more going on here than just a reversal of riches. There's also, I think even worse, a reversal of relationship. In chapter 1, Hosea has 3 children. God tells them to give them particular names to symbolise what's going to happen to his people. And so, chapter 1, verse 6, Gomer conceived again, and she gave birth to a daughter. And the Lord said to Hosea, "Call her Lo Ruhamah," which means not loved. "For I will no longer show love to Israel." Out of all the nations, God had said, "I set my love on Israel." And now they are not loved. Verse 8, After she had weaned Lo-Ruhamah, Gomer had another son, and the Lord said, "Call him Lo-Ammi," which means, "not my people." Or literally, actually, it means, "not mine." You imagine the church notices that week. Congratulations to Hosea and Gomer on the arrival of their third child, weighed in at 7 pounds 3 ounces. And Hosea, what are you going to call him? "Not mine." Lovely. He'll make a great brother for not loved. And you can imagine people saying, "Why have you called your baby such a terrible name?" And Hosea would reply, "Because that's what the Lord says about you." Verse 9, he says, "You are not my people, and I am not your God." Or literally, actually, "You are not my people, and I am not I am to you." And if you know the Old Testament, those are terrible words. God brought Israel out of Egypt, and Moses said, "What's your name?" And he said, "Call me I am." It's like him saying, "I'm God Almighty, but you, my people, aren't. You can call me I am." That was his sort of personal name. And now he reverses that. "You are not my people, and I am not I am to you." Years ago, I knew a couple where the wife called her husband Bear. We all called him David. That was his name. She called him Bear. Imagine she's unfaithful. This didn't happen. Just imagine. She's unfaithful to him. It's terrible. He's awfully hurt. He says to her, "That's it. I've had enough. I'm leaving." And she says, "Oh no, please, Bear, no. Don't call me that. It's over." That's what God is saying. To Israel, he was, "I am." Now, I'm not I am to you anymore. It's over. The relationship is over. And what this means in practice is not simply that they're not talking to each other. Now they're enemies, and God is against them. Chapter 5, verse 14. "I will be like a lion to Ephraim, like a great lion to Judah. I will tear them to pieces and go away. I will carry them off with no one to rescue them." Or chapter 13, "They grew proud, they forgot me, so I will be like a lion to them. Like a leopard I will look by the path. Like a bear robbed of her cubs, I will attack them and rip them open. Like a lion I will devour them." God used to be their provider and their protector, and now he's become their predator who will destroy them. And this isn't just a sort of abstract idea. This happened in 722 BC. Assyria, the nation in the area, came and attacked Israel. And they defeated, and they destroyed, and they deported them all. God came as a lion, and it was awful. Hosea says spiritual adultery. How does God respond? It leads to a reversal of riches and a reversal of relationship. Now let's ask, what does this mean for us today? Whoever we are, whatever we think of Jesus and God, what does this say to us? I mentioned it earlier on that this action teaches Israel who God is. It shows them, oh, God's the one who's blessed us. God's the one who's given us these things. So in that way, it's a kind of discipline and education. And the New Testament says that God continues to do that today. He can take difficult things we face in life, things we go through, and use them to teach us something. Maybe to teach us he's there, or to teach us he's more important than other things, or to teach us to trust him and depend on him. So you can look at this sort of this reversal, judgment stuff in Hosea and say, yeah, God does that today in ways to teach us things. However, I think the main way the New Testament, where we are, looks back on Hosea, it sees this reversal as a picture of God's promised final judgment in the future. And as a picture, it therefore functions as a warning to us. If you persist in spiritual adultery, what Hosea calls that, if you reject God and make something else your God, one day you will face this reversal. We get this future judgment described in Revelation at the end of the Bible. So let me read a verse or two. Revelation 18 says, "Fallen is Babylon the Great. The kings of the earth committed adultery with her, and the merchants of the earth grew rich from her excessive luxuries." Babylon stands for rejecting God. Babylon's kind of anti-God. And then it uses the image of adultery again, putting your love and your trust in not God. Do that. Take the love and the trust you owe to God and give it to something else, and God will judge you. And in the judgment is a reversal of riches. 18 verse 14, the people say about Babylon, "All your luxury and splendor has vanished, never to be recovered. You were dressed in fine linen, glittering gold, precious stones, but in 1 hour such great wealth has been brought to ruin." In this life, we can have many good things. I mean, it varies, obviously, but to some degree, we can enjoy food, family, relationships, work, creativity, homes, peace. But Revelation's saying if we reject God, persistently turn our back on him, one day there will be a reversal of riches, health and life reversed into death and mourning, food into famine, gold and music and creativity into ruin and destruction. And more than that, God promises a reversal of relationship. Revelation 20 says, "Then I saw a great white throne. I saw the dead standing before the throne. The books were opened, and the dead were judged by what was written in the books, according to what they had done." And they're thrown out of God's presence. God's judgment is reversal. We were made to enjoy this world, to enjoy each other, and most of all to enjoy God. And Hosea and the Bible as a whole is saying if we reject him, then he will respond with reversal. We won't enjoy the world, no good things. We won't enjoy each other, no relationships. And most of all, we won't know him, no God. Now, as I mentioned, talking like this is not very popular today. You might be sitting there with all sorts of questions and objections coming to your mind. But what about? But what about? You might be sitting there thinking, yes, I've heard this before. I don't really like it, though. Embarrassed about it. Let me make a few comments on kind of how we think about this. What might help us accept this? First of all, judgment vindicates God as God. Do you remember the logic I said earlier? God gives gifts to Israel, they thank Baal. Same today. People think their health, their family, their food, their money, their holidays, their happiness, they think it comes from, what, themselves? Their job? Family background? Good diet? Being good at relationships? Good luck? Actually, it all comes from God. And so when God judges and takes away those riches, people will see, well, they'll say, as this happens, they'll say, oh, I see there is a God who made me and gave me everything I have. There is a God who's been wonderfully generous to me, and I never thanked. There is a God who I depend on for my very breath, but never acknowledged. I see that now. God will be vindicated, and it's right he's vindicated, seen to be who he is, the God, the true God, the good God, the generous God. And it helps me sort of understand judgment when I see it as vindicating who God is. Second comment, judgment is just and good and right. When we judge, we usually get angry, we get things out of perspective, we can be vindictive, we overreact, all that sort of thing. God's judging isn't like that. God's judgment is an expression of his justice. And justice is actually something we all want. You know, when we look at the world and all our lives and we say, things shouldn't be like this, that's not right, we're calling for justice. And that's what God's judgment is about. It's about righting wrongs. It's about giving things what they deserve. And I think Hosea sort of encourages us to see that through this image of adultery. Because what does adultery deserve? I mean, the natural reaction is hurt and pain and anger. And often, the end of the relationship. And that's a right reaction. Abuse someone like that, and what do you expect? Especially when it's repeated, especially when it's persistent, what do you expect? Right anger, right end of relationship, right reversal. Well, if that's how we react, how much more God? I started with my friend Steve, suggesting one day we'll laugh with God as we look back on what we did wrong. Well, that doesn't take what we've done seriously, and that doesn't take God seriously. To put it in Hosea terms, can you imagine a betrayed husband or wife sitting down with their errant partner and saying, "Do you remember how you used to sleep around? What a laugh." Well, that's sick, isn't it? We don't laugh at adultery. And God won't laugh at spiritual adultery. He's right to be angry, and he is right to judge. Last thing to say, the reversal gets reversed. Hosea chapter 1 finishes, verse 9 tells us about Hosea's child, call him Lo Ami, you're not my people, the relationship is over. And then we get verse 10. In the place where it was said to them, you are not my people, they will be called children of the living God. And then 2 verse 1, say of your brothers, my people, and say of your sisters, my loved ones. So Hosea is saying this reversal of relationship is itself going to be reversed. Those who are not my people will become my people again. Those who are not loved will become loved again. Judgment is real, but there is a future. There is a way out of this somehow. And that's because God responds to spiritual adultery in 2 ways. Yes, with right judgment, but he also responds with the most extraordinary, amazing, counterintuitive, mad, out of this world love. And that's what we're going to look at next week. And I really want you to hear that. For now, we must hear this judgment. It might be you're not a Christian. It might be this is really new to you. And I'm sorry to sort of like, you're like probably thinking, what on earth is going on? If you've got lots of questions, that's absolutely fine. Please ask your questions. Come and chat. We'd love to talk. Think it through. Hear more. But as you do that, hear the warning. This is what God promises. This is what he says is right and true and good and fitting. So be warned and come back next week and hear about God's love. And if we're Christians, well, we've received that love. But let's not just jump to the answer. Let's make sure we hear this too. Let's hear it for those we know who aren't Christians, don't trust Jesus. This makes me think of my parents, my sister, and it makes me want to love and speak and pray and pray and pray. Thank you, Adam. And let's hear it for ourselves as well. Left to ourselves, this is what we deserve. This is what would be right for us. This is justice. So this is what we deserve, and this is what Jesus has taken for us. This is the depth of his love for us, and the depth of what he's done for us in his death. But let's hear what Hosea is saying. Hosea says God's response is awful but appropriate, frightening but fitting, terrible but right and just.